And you've just heard Your Poison Pen by Kevin P. Gilday and the Glasgow Cross, which is taken from their new album, How I Won the Culture War, out now with Iffy Folk Records. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Kevin now. Hello, Kevin.
Hi Ali, how you doing, mate?
I'm really good. I'm really good. So here's a big question to kick things off. Tell us all about How I Won the Culture War.
So it's our third album with the Glasgow Cross. And yeah, it's one that we've been working on for a while. And by that I mean the last album, Pure Concrete, came out in 2020. So there has been a bit of a gap in between. I mean, part of that's just the fact that myself and Ralph, who's the collaborator in the band, who I kind of write with, we are busy and have loads of projects on.
Yeah.
But also we just were very kind of stringent about what we were putting out into the world and the quality of it. So we were really kind of we didn't want to do it unless we knew it was going to be better than the last record, unless it was going to feel like a progression. So it
Yeah.
took a wee while to find the right songs to get there, and a lot of kind of trial and error. But we are so proud of the album, and we're so happy that it's out in the world and that people get to listen to it now.
I was going to ask you about the time it's taken between albums because it is 4 years, but it's not been any 4 years. It's been a quite astonishing 4 years. The world is not the same place as when
No,
we signed off in the last one. And does that kind of feed into the new album at all?
yeah, I think so. I think even through the title, How I Won the Culture War, it's like it's definitely been molded and affected by our current kind of debates and the schisms in society. I feel like I've, although not maybe contributed in terms of getting into these arguments online, but I feel like I've definitely been around them and been adjacent to them, especially in the arts. Um, and I think they've just started to seep in that sense of binary, that sense of kind of drama and conflict and tension. And I mean, how can it not? It's like that's the world that we're living in just now, and it's definitely kind of found its way into the record in some ways.
Yeah. And are there other kind of themes that people might pick up as they listen to it?
Yeah, I think that there's a kind of general theme of agency and control, I think, in terms of what we have control over in our lives and what is kind of bigger than us and kind of dictating our lives for us. So there's stuff in there about that, about kind of, in a social sense, in a kind of national sense. But also something that I'm really interested in is how our technology is now doing that for us as well. And the algorithm and the way that is starting to dictate our choices and dictate our life um, is something that I'm both kind of really interested in and actually just quite frightened of. And
Yeah.
I kind of see that seeping in. And even in the way that we're trying to promote this record, I'm like, oh, you can't just be like, hey guys, here's a social media post, the album's out, hope you all enjoy it. You're up against that algorithm now. You're up against what these people want you to share and what they want to be put out in the world. So, yeah, I think all that stuff is kind of seeping into the record as well.
And also, in terms of how things have changed in all areas of art and culture, I can't think of many better people to talk to than yourself about that. I mean, you'll have seen many changes. And you talked there about the war, how I won war on culture, and that's wars within culture. But there's also a war on culture, and just that it's more difficult to do what you do, to make music, to do spoken, to do anything like that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And as a kind of proudly working class artist as well, I can see those voices getting pushed and pushed and pushed to the extent where we're kind of getting stuck with this quite homogenized culture. The across the arts, and I work in poetry, theatre, music, right across the board,
Yeah.
there is a risk aversion that's coming into play now because everyone's worried about their tiny little bit of the pie, that little fraction of funding. And the more that funding's getting pushed and the more people are competing for it, it is actually leading to people not taking risks when it comes to letting artists make art.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in a position now where the only real great art that I'm seeing coming out, it tends to be independent. But then again, that's not being able to realize its full potential because it doesn't have the money and the funding behind it to make it as great as it can be and to get it out to as many people. So I feel we're in a really difficult place culturally. There's great artists making great work, but they are getting squeezed and squeezed, and loads of people are just making the decision not to. Like, why, why would I spend all my days working so hard to make art and get nothing for it and get like, a kind of dwindling compensation for all that time? And people are just deciding, I'll just go and work in academia, or I'll just go and work in, get into social work or, counseling or whatever. And I don't blame them. I honestly don't blame them a bit. I thought about it as well.
Yeah.
Um, and it feels like we're getting stuck with the people who can afford to keep making art. And by that, I mean middle class people who have maybe more of an option to do that.
Mhm.
And because of that, we're losing voices.
Yeah. Yeah.
People, and think about how many great artists we are not hearing just now, the ones we will never hear of and will never know their name, and they could be here adding to our cultural conversation, and we're just never going to hear them because people aren't taking a risk and because there isn't the money there to let people take that risk. So
And
yeah.
it's that cliche of if you can see it, you can be it. And I think things were changing. For I've seen things change, but then I think you're right. There's a regression. So
Hmm.
folk who now are kind of discovering writers or poets or musicians, the options of them discovering those people seems to be going to be reduced. Which,
Yes.
yeah. So in terms of making the album, were all these things kind of going through your head as you were going to make it, or you kind of been around long enough to know you know how to do it?
I think that I was definitely that thing of these things were all kicking about in my head, and and our pressures in my life that I was feeling. But when it came to the record, it felt like we were kind of enclosed in our own wee world, which was a really lovely thing. We made it in the kind of every folk record studio. Um, so it was great to be able to just block out the world and put the phones away and not be part of that and go, okay, we have an opportunity to make a piece of art that we are proud of,
Yeah.
not something that anybody else wants to hear, not something that's going to tickle the algorithm, not something that's going to, win an award, but the thing that we want to make. So I think that all those pressures were there, but when we closed the door in that studio, it felt really liberating. It felt like, okay, this is just for us and we're going to make what we want to make.
Because you said before we started recording, now the album's out. It's out the day we're actually speaking. And you think, oh, right, this is no longer just, it's a different stage, isn't
Yeah.
it? Folk are going to be listening to it and you're going to have to talk to people about it. And as we heard on the track Your Poison Pen there's spoken word going on
Hmm.
as well. And I'm interested to know when you decide what's going to be a song or what's going to be sung and what's going to be spoken.
Mm.
Is it quite easy for you to make that distinction?
I think that there is like a very specific choice that I make, but I don't know if there's an algorithm or equation that decides that. I feel like it's probably me just reacting to the texture of the song and me reacting to the feel of it and just a kind of I love those artistic choices that we make that
Yeah.
we just go, oh, it's that. Of course it has to be that thing. And for this record especially, it was a big act in trusting ourselves and being really decisive and making really mad decisions actually and going, oh, but I think this is right. Like we're like following our instinct. So yeah, a lot of that stuff where it's like, oh, I feel there's some spoken word in here. I don't know why. I just feel it. It's an instinctual thing. And 9 times out of 10, we're probably correct. And that time where we're incorrect, it was worth giving it a go
Yeah,
and spending a day trying it a different way and seeing how it worked out. So yeah, I don't know if there's a straight answer to that other than just
just
feeling
feel
it
it
out.
out. Yeah, yeah. No, it never struck me before, but just listening to quite a few of the tracks on it, I thought, I wonder why when the decision for that's made.
Mhm.
Mentioned that you've been working on this for a while. Exactly how long have you been working on the album?
Um, I mean, I think that at least the last 2 years, kind of fully. But some of these songs kind of predate that as well. They were kicking about in some kind of form. Some of them were just 10 seconds of a riff that was recorded in a rehearsal room, or some of it was just some, lines on a scrap of paper. So they've been kicking about and coalescing. But I think, the last couple of years we've really kind of, jumped into it. We had a whole kind of slew of demos, like so many of them,
Mm.
and just tons of them just didn't make the grade. And we
Yeah,
did have a very kind of honest conversation of going, is this good enough? Is this going to be a progression for us? Is this going to be something we're really proud of? And we shouldn't keep on going in that direction unless we are. So we ended up going back to the drawing board, and some of those songs survived, most of them didn't. And then they kind of took different forms and went in different directions. So it was a really kind of experimental process, which was great. And I think working in our own studio gave us the ability to do that because it didn't feel like this big time
yeah,
constraint. Like, oh, well, we paid, 200 quid for this studio day, so you better make it worthwhile. It was like, oh, we can spend a day chasing down this sound and then decide we don't like it.
yeah.
That and that is a total privilege to be able to do that actually, because I feel like more and more making music is becoming a kind of like equation and something that's quite kind of time sensitive. Oh, we better do this, and we've got this much money. How much can we get for it? It felt like we'd taken those constraints away and allowed ourselves the ability to just have a look at it and have a go and try and to fail, basically.
I think that's all been time and consideration well spent. Because what I was thinking as I was listening to the album is it sounds like a proper album. It sounds like all these songs kind of almost speak to each other. In,
Mm,
in there, it's not just oh, we need to fill this up. Let's stick another couple of tracks. Is that how you feel now that it's out there that this is a whole thing?
definitely. I mean, sometimes when you're making a record, you feel very aware of like, oh, this is a single. I feel like, yeah, this is the one that people are going to like. And then it's maybe like, oh, this one's like fun, but you're maybe not as convinced by our tracks as you are by others. And this one, I was like, I don't know what the singles are. I assume there's no singles whatsoever, but it felt like a cohesive piece of art. It felt like, oh, every single one of these 10 tracks could stand on its own and say something about the world and say something about our relationships. And every one of them I would stand by and say, that's me, I made that piece of art and I'm very proud of it. And when they all come together and like you said, start having that conversation with each other and start kind of changing the context of each other, it's really special. So I think that again, really instinctual. That track listing, we were like, I was like, this is a track listing. It was like we didn't have to think about it. It was just like, of course it's this. This is the feel. This is the flow. This is how it should be. So yeah.
That word flow, I think, is exactly right. They seem to just absolutely work into each other, and it has got a beginning, a middle, and an end. Which
Mhm.
sometimes is not the case with an album. And I'll also say, having been listening to it over the last week, my favorite track has been changing throughout. And we'll we'll
Good.
we'll hear my current favorite in a moment, which I'm interested to talk to you about. But what's the recording process then? You say you've got Iffy Folk Studios, so is it quite I guess it would be more relaxed than having, we've got an hour to set up the drums and then we have to be out here and, the usual thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like there's obviously a really big investment in time
Mhm.
that happens with that. That you need to be like, okay, well, we're giving a day over to this and doing that, but we weren't kind of doing it intensely in terms of like, 5 days a week. It was like, oh, let's do 2 days this week, let's do one day next week. It was fitting in around our lives, which actually gave the songs a lot of space to breathe. So we'd be recording on the Sunday, and then I'd have a whole week of listening to those demos and kind of going, "Ah, I really love this, but I'm not really enjoying this part." And just having that time and space to really think about it was like really amazing actually, and helped to just let the record grow. And I don't want to sound like a total hippie, but it was like we were listening to the songs and letting the songs decide where they wanted to go. Do you know what I mean? And it was like sometimes it's like, okay, this feels like it wants to go in this direction, and we have to facilitate that. Do you know what I mean? And that was kind of our jobs.
I think that's interesting because we've already spoken about the kind of time constraints and the pressure on things and to get things out there. And these days, if you haven't put anything out for a month, it's like that kind of, oh my God, I have to get something out. It's like that kind of across the board. But this, this almost sounds like going back to, right, we're going to make this and release it when we are happy with it. And it goes back to what you said about doing it kind of for each other
Yeah.
and for yourselves. And then when it comes out, well, you can let it go and other folk can
Yeah.
listen and be happy with it.
I think that there's something very liberating about being uncool. Do you know what I mean? No, nobody's going, oh, I need this new Glasgow Cross record and I'm going to fight someone for it, and and the fans are clamoring. People would be like, oh, I'm looking forward to it. People would say, oh, I'm really looking forward to hearing the next record. But there wasn't that thing of there's a label that is chasing us, or there's a publicist chasing us, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh, we control the whole process from the recording right through to the release. And as a complete control freak, I absolutely love being in charge of that, because it means that nothing goes out without it being 100% what we are happy with. Um, I think as an artist, especially like the way my careers went, where I've kind of do a bit of lots of different things,
Yeah.
it feels like I am my own cottage industry. And I'm like, and it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then I also need to be my own like kind of quality tester and make sure that anything that comes out of, Kevin Day Industries is like absolutely top class and I'm ready for the world to see. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things.
I think that's absolutely right. I think that also applies to Iffy Folk Records and other small independent labels, is
Yeah.
that people will trust the folk who are putting the records out and they'll say, yeah, I have, I know what Iffy Folk have done before.
Mhm.
And the similar thing, I've seen Kevin in the theatre, I've seen him doing spoken word, whatever, then, I'm going to trust that the music's going to be great as well.
Yeah.
And in a moment, we're going to hear Passing Places, which I'm really enjoying. And it features Mima Merrill. How did you get Mima on board? Was that something you wrote for her?
Well, kind of like we kind of knew there was going to be another voice in that track. And again, just that instinctual thing of going, I feel like there's another voice coming through and
Yeah.
it's not mine. And Mima I had met um, during a project I was doing called the Bank of Springburn, where we took over a kind of disused bank in Springburn shopping centre and made it into like a pop-up arts hub, which was a really great project. And as part of that, I was curating like little showcases, and I'd asked Mima to pop by and do a set of her songs. And I just really loved her music, and we got on really well, and I was like, oh, she's lovely. And there was just something about it. I was like, oh, it was, you know, she just has a different accent. That was it. She has a really beautiful voice and in a different accent, and I could just feel that other voice coming through. So yeah, she was like the perfect choice to do that. And yeah, then I kind of wrote that poem that finishes the track, and obviously I had her voice in mind while I was writing it. And we had a great kind of recording session where she turned up and I wouldn't let her read the poem until she turned up on the day. And I said, here's the poem. And she read it and she was like, oh, that's really good. And she enjoyed it. And I was like, okay. And now I'm going to direct you. So we kind of had a great day and a great bit of fun, kind of getting really into how you perform a spoken word piece, which she'd never really done before. So by the end of it, I think she was like, I'm never working with this guy again. But well, we had a great time and she absolutely nailed it as the recording attests. It's amazing.
It works beautifully. It really does. So I know that you've got the launch on the 19th. Unfortunately, this show is going out on the 20th. Let's presume it's been a huge success.
Yes.
But you've changed your kind of live setup. You know, you will at least for that gig.
Yeah, definitely, and probably for the most part going forward. I mean, we were always kind of quite nimble as a live act, which I really enjoyed. You know, just having two people on stage brings a lot of freedom. So it would just be myself and Ralph, and we'd turn up, and you know, there was a fair bit of kit in terms of because Ralph would be playing guitar and piano, and there'd be some synths involved, and there'd be a drum machine and stuff. But it was always really nice to just do that with a two piece. But this time round, we've actually added a drummer in, Ben, who's fantastic. He done the drums on the record, so he's been part of these songs from very close to the beginning, actually. So I'm really looking forward to playing more as we go forward. I think we'll be playing a lot more live gigs, hopefully in the next year or so. Um, maybe a wee bit of touring. We'll be going wherever we can, basically, and bringing it to people because we've worked really hard on translating these songs into a live context.
Right.
Um, and they all work brilliantly live as well, which I think is always a testament to a good song. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like if you can strip it back and put it on stage, then you're like, okay, it's actually the song that's strong rather than the production or whatever. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be a change of pace, and feel more like a fully kind of realized live band, I think.
Well, I mean, they work brilliantly recorded, and I can't wait to hear and see them live. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's always a pleasure.
No, thank you very much, and thank you very much for playing tracks off the album as well and letting your audience hear it. It's amazing.
And this is Kevin P. Gilday and the Glasgow Cross featuring Mima Mero and Passing Places.